Hello FlossTube and welcome back. This is part 6 of the Celebration of Colour Stitch Along video series, in which we are examining colour, its various properties, the way that we perceive colour, the way that artists use colour, and hopefully understanding colour a little bit better so that we can understand how we can use colour most effectively in our stitching. I'm Ros Clark, this is Ros Clark Craft. You'll find me on Instagram as Ros Clark Craft and also on Etsy. You will find all the parts of the stitch along that have been released so far on the link tree. Link is in the drop down box below. If you're on Instagram, it's also in my Instagram bio, and I just add the parts there, so it's always the same link. Don't forget, if you think there's a mistake, do check back and see if there's been an updated version to download. But I am hoping we've got to the point of the stitch along where mistakes are very few and far between. It's much easier, isn't it, now that we've got the frame more or less established. And this week you'll be stitching the final section of the frame to see where things already are and where they should go. And it's been easier for me as well these last couple of weeks. So let me show you mine. So this is the one, well, in fact, I'm going to start here with my first stitched model in the sort of bright primaries. And you'll see all of the yellow stitched in there. This week we are finishing all of the yellow, that is to say all of the frame as well as all of the yellow in the main image. Yours won't look exactly like this because I stitched this, as I've said before, before I made some changes, and also I changed quite significantly the way the parts were split up since I stitched that model. But this one is what yours should look like after you stitched week 6. This is my second stitch going through with this slightly different palette, slightly darker tones and sort of off colours rather than primaries. And you'll see we are halfway through the colour wheel there, all the way around from red, purple, red, red, orange, 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 yellow, and yellow. Now, mine, the yellow in this colour wheel is not the same as the yellow of the frame. And that is because when I finished stitching my frame, and I could see this was coming, the only amount I had left of my yellow thread was this. And that was not going to be enough to stitch everything in the design. So I thought, well, actually the best thing to do, rather than try and eke that out, some of it, is just pick a different colour yellow to use in the actual design. So I think it looks fine. I don't think it matters too much. I've tried to choose one. It's not the same. It is paler than the one in the frame, but I think it works okay with the colours that I've chosen so far. I love how it's looking at this stage. I say that every time, but it is true. You know, you've got the real sort of sunshine colours all the way from yellow round to that sort of dark pinky reddy purple colour. I love how they're working together. You'll see some of these blend together better than others in those checkerboard squares. Some of them contrast more with others. And you'll start to see, obviously, we've still got some sections that we haven't stitched in at all, but a lot of sections you can see how the pattern is working out. And one of the things I've tried to do is put together, in some areas, grouping together colours that are close together on the colour wheel, and in other areas, contrasts from the colour wheel, so that you can get a sense of how they might work together. You can see in some places we're doing a kind of spectrum thing. Here, this is what Rachel of Stitchy Rach calls the prison cell area, and the sort of grid area. This column is now full. Some boxes and some little bits we're going to start filling in from next week, so that'll be fun to see. Other areas you might be able to sort of work out where it's going next, and some hopefully are still a little bit of a mystery in our mystery stitch along. We are well over halfway through the stitching, of course, by this stage, because we've done all of that frame as well as half of the main colour sections. We haven't completely finished the black, but we've certainly done more than half of that as well. Next week we're going to finish off the red and the red purple dots in those as well when we go on to yellow green. But anyway, this is what yellow is going to look like when you stitch it this week. Now, last time I left you with the question, what colour, like proper normal colour, not, you know, specific shade of a particular colour, have we not mentioned at all? And some of you, I think, will have spotted that the answer to that is brown. Like you see it in, you know, any sort of children's box of paints or crayons, basic set of colours, red, yellow, green, blue, purple, orange, brown. You might even get 2 browns. I mean, the browns are always the ones that I never use, but there are browns. And you think, well, actually, but we had a colour wheel, and our colour wheel looks something like this, split into 12. Where's the brown? And you might say, well, it's sort of around here. Get rid of this bit of thread. Sort of around here, but also, you know, that it's coming a bit, the colour's not absolutely showing brilliant on the screen, but, you know, that's a proper yellow in real life, and yellow, orange, orange, red, orange, red. They're not really brown. I mean, you can sort of hear how they might get to brown, but they're not really brown. And that's a question I wonder if you know the answer to. If you're mixing paint, which is where we started in the very first video I did introducing this stitch along, was mixing paint to get different colours. What colours would you mix to get brown? We're starting with our primary colours, red, yellow and blue. Well, if we mix red and yellow, we get orange, yellow and blue, we get green, red and purple, we get red and blue, we get purple. How are we going to get brown? So the answer is we're going to throw away our colour wheel. Colour wheel is a useful thing, but it is not the only way that you can organise colour. And in fact, if you think about colour, we talked about this one week as well, colour in terms of its light and colour relating to the particular frequency or wavelength of the light, that is not in a circle, that is a straight line. You know, it just gets bigger. I think it is this way around, but I might be wrong, and it's a long time since I did physics. I think it is that the wavelength of red is the longest and the frequency the shortest, but it could be the other way around. But then it just goes all the way through to purple, which has the longest frequency, shortest wavelength, or possibly the other way around. But there's no particular obvious reason why they should meet at the end, and they kind of do, and it's sort of amazing. And, you know, it looks like it makes sense, the colour wheel, but actually they are colours along a line. And you see that if you see a rainbow, you know, they start at one end from red and go through to purple. They don't start again at red, or they don't start arbitrarily. So you never see a rainbow that starts at, you know, blue or yellow and then goes through. They always go from red to purple, or purple to red, red to purple. So there's no particular scientific reason why they should fit in a wheel, but we often do display them that way. This is another way that you can think about organising colour, and I think it's quite helpful. If you think of colour as a triangle, so we're going to put our 3 primary colours at the corners of the triangle, yellow, red and blue. And so then between yellow and blue, we've got green. Between yellow and red, we've got orange. And blue and red, you've got purple. And again, that's not showing brilliantly on the camera, but it is a purple. So then what have you got in these 3 triangles? Well, you've got a sort of dullish mauve kind of colour, I might call that. This one is kind of an olivey green. And this one, it's kind of like a dark olive green, I guess, is what I might call that. But actually, all those 3 are formed out of all 3 primary colours. So what they are, this is green, orange and yellow. So that's yellow, yellow and red, yellow and blue. So that is yellow, red and blue. Red, red and yellow, red and blue. Red, yellow, blue. Blue, blue and yellow, blue and red. Red, yellow, blue. And that's fundamentally how, if you're mixing paint, you make brown, is you take another colour, any other colour, and add the opposite colour from the colour wheel. So if you were starting with red, the opposite colour on the wheel, let me show you the wheel again because it is kind of useful, and we're used to it, so we know what it means. If I were to take, this is the bright red, the sort of main primary red, immediately opposite is a green, which is yellow and blue. So if I were to take a little bit of green paint and add that into my red, it would turn brown. If I took, what's this one? This is blue purple, immediately opposite yellow orange. So that's got some yellow and some red in it. That's got some red and some blue in it. So if I add that to that, I get a brownish colour here. Now, there are a lot of browns. I mean, there are a lot of any colour, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as well, how we make a whole range of different kinds of each colour. But brown, fundamentally, is just different amounts of each colour mixed together. And so what this is, I believe, a dodecagon with a circle cut out of it, 12-sided shape. So around the outside of this, we've got our yellows, yellow oranges, red oranges, red oranges, reds, and so on, all the way around. But you can see the yellow is split into two, and I'm not quite sure if it's going to tell us why. Oh yeah, all the primary colours are split into two. I think, yeah, just to give us a little bit more detail on this, there's two yellows, two reds, two blues, each tending in slightly different directions. And then the layer inside that, let me just see, does it tell me, or am I going to work out? Okay, no. The layer inside that is muted. Okay, these are not browns. This is the wrong diagram. There's a lot of diagrams. So that's going to come on to what we're going to talk to in a minute. I thought that was going to be a brown triangle. We've got a brown triangle, brown circle. I don't know if we do. Okay. Okay, that may be all I have to say about brown. You can end up with, yeah, I don't think there is a version of it, of a colour wheel where what you have done is every colour slightly altered by adding its opposite colour. That's what we call the complementary colour, to make it a shade of brown. And so you can have brownish, sort of reddish browns, greenish browns, purplish browns, yellowish browns. You can have any kind of brown you like by changing. So this one tends towards yellow because it's got yellow in both of these colours. This one tends towards red. This one sort of tends towards blue, although in this version it kind of looks much more green. You can make any shade of brown by mixing three colours together. And when you're doing colour mixing, because paints tend to, so if you're doing it with actual paint, paints tend to be not pure in pigment, you can easily end up with mud. Everything tends towards mud, the more different colours you mix into it. I think that is all I have to say about brown. But you may have been thinking, where is brown on the colour wheel? And now you know. Now I do want to talk about how we make a whole lot of different colours, and I've now lost, because I was looking at that thing, the page that I wanted to show you in here. Just give me a minute. While I'm just looking for this, you may have found, if you did look up that app that I suggested, the Hue app, that game that's taking you from one colour to another, because effectively what you're doing in the middle areas of that is a sort of mixed version of the two, often they will be quite brownish. Right, here we are. So I'm going to show you. So top line, blue, sort of blue. This one's kind of purpley blue. This one's kind of a pinky red, orangey red, yellow, green. On the actual page, no, I think that is about what they're like. This is definitely looks more orange than red to me, and this one definitely looks more pink than red. So I would put red sort of in between those two. But anyway, we started off with 6 colours that you can see where they would fit on the colour wheel. The next line, what has happened to those colours? They have become paler, haven't they? You can see how they relate. You can see that they're the same colours, but one is paler than the other. And then if you look at the next line, even more so. So with paint mixing, that would just be adding more and more white to each of those colours as they move along. Now, what about this line? It's not just adding white. It's actually a greyish tone. Let me show you a bit more so you can compare these two. So they do still flow one from another. That doesn't look brilliant on screen, and that is really the lack of my camera, but they do flow one to another. But this is quite a nice one. You can see that very pale pink, pinkish grey, pale blue, bluey lavender, lavenderish grey. That's really not showing brilliantly on the screen. Pale blue, bluish grey, pale orange. That is a kind of orangey grey, although it does, I admit, on the screen look a bit greenish, and yellow. And that one looks quite greenish grey. What about these colours? Well, again, you can see how they relate, hopefully, to the ones above. And they're not pale, but they are definitely greyer. Green and greyish green, yellowish grey, orangish grey. And again, these darker, but still much greyer than the original tones. Now, what would we call that? And again, we don't have to get too caught up on the terminology, partly because the way the terminology is used is not brilliantly consistent. But what they're calling this original prismatic colour at the top. Moving south, each colour undergoes a series of transitions. So they all go through the same transitions. Rows 2 and 3 are are tinted versions. So you tint a colour by adding grey. No, you tint a colour by adding white. And so these are what they call muted colours. These are what they call chromatic greys. That is to say, they're basically grey, but they're grey with a colour. Rows 4, 5 and 6 are 3-part colours. So these are becoming brownish. They're close to row 3 in value, that is to say lightness and darkness, but we've added the third hue. So here to the yellow, or the yellowy, slightly orangish, we've added a little bit of purple. To the orange, we would have added a little bit of blue, and so on. So they're slightly, they do look greyish, but they are also slightly brownish. And I think that's what you're seeing when you're here. It's not just a greyer version. It's actually a browner version. We might call it a richer colour. That purpley blue has definitely got some yellowish tone to it here. This blue definitely becomes more greenish, doesn't it? So row 5, that's this one, matches row 2 for value, lightness and darkness. But the third colour brings the saturation down. It's greyer. Row 6, rich and relatively dark, muted colour variations of the original. Really interesting, isn't it? And I think this is one of the things that we need to pay most attention to when we're doing colour substitution. You might say this colour and this colour look quite close, substitute one for the other. But actually, if everything else in the colour palette is in this line, that would look really, really wrong. And you might be better saying, well, actually, this is quite different, but it fits within the palette much better. Next time, we're going to do some actual examples of this with colour substitution. But I want us to understand how the greyish tone and the kind of brownish tone, as well as the light and dark, really make a difference to how colours work together. If we were to put even one of these colours in with this palette, we might say, well, they're the same lightness and darkness. Yeah, but they're going to look really different next to each other. This and this, not going to work well. This and this, it's not a good substitution. You might be better with that, almost certainly be better with that. So what I'd love you to do, if you have the time this week, is to start playing with some of your threads, particularly if you've got bobbinated threads. It's easy to see, I think, and get together all the threads you've got of a particular colour, so all the greens or all the yellowy greens or something like that, and just see if you can start to arrange them, not just according to light and dark, but according to their greyish tone or their brownish tone. See if you can see how you would fit them together and which you think would make good substitutions and which actually might not. And we're going to talk more about that next time. Happy stitching this week. Don't forget to let me know if you see any mistakes in yellow, and we'll be back next week looking at yellow green.